Australia, the oldest, most extreme continent on Earth. Nowhere else do you find snakes more venomous, wildlife more bizarre. Over tens of thousands of years, people have adapted to this untamed land. They have endured its extremes and gradually learned to love it. From the rich jungle to the red desert to the snowy mountains. But in this vast island of wild beauty, the crowning jewels are Australia's national parks. Between the Australian mainland and Antarctica, swept by the gales of the roaring 40s, lies Tasmania, Australia's largest and wildest island. Even in midsummer, the strong westerly winds that encircle the Antarctic can bring storms and sometimes snow. But this island stands resolute like a fortress against the ravages of time. The rugged mountains have created a citadel of unique habitat, protecting the last remnants of a lost world. Tasmania took shape in the tectonic rage that wrenched Australia from the supercontinent of Gondwana 45 million years ago. More than 1/3 of Tasmania is dedicated to national parks, registered as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Ancient sheltered valleys of temperate rainforest have been preserved. The high humidity and mild temperatures create an almost closed canopy, which acts like a greenhouse dome. It's a magical world, a dream in green. But when the sun goes down, it can seem like a nightmare, as it echoes to the sounds of weird creatures. Here in the primeval forest, it's as if the evolutionary clock stood still, and around it developed some of the strangest animals on the planet. An egg-laying mammal with a duck's beak, a four-legged carnivorous kangaroo with a face like a dog and stripes like a tiger, and the devil himself, a flesh-eating marsupial with the scream of a banshee and the appetite of a vampire. It is summer at Cradle Mountain in remote northwest Tasmania. In 1922, this almost untouched wilderness was designated as the Cradle Mountain Lake St Clair Scenic Reserve. From the rugged basalt peaks of the Cradle Mountain Massif to Lake St Clair in the south, it's a place like nowhere else on Earth. For those who care to visit, there's a trail that winds its way 80 kilometres over the roof of Tasmania. This is one of the world's great treks, through mountain heaths and moorland and into the dense forests. There are over 4,000 lakes in this part of Tasmania. Most of them formed in the last great ice age. An average annual rainfall of over 2 metres maintains a rainforest supporting the ancient biota of Gondwana. In 1936, a remarkable animal called Benjamin died in a Tasmanian zoo. Despite the name, she was actually a female, And although she looked like a dog, she had a pouch for her young. Benjamin was a Tasmanian tiger or thylacine. At the time of European settlement 2 centuries ago, there were thousands of thylacine on the island state of Tasmania. Sadly, Benjamin was the very last known of her kind, extinguished by bounty hunters after 4 million years in this land. This is a wild and inaccessible wilderness, the domain of the unexpected, the extraordinary. Some might even say unearthly. You may even encounter the devil himself. If you stood here at this spot 10 million years ago, you might have been stopped dead by the same scream that pierces the forest tonight. When the first white settlers came here 2 centuries ago, they agreed it was the cry of the devil, and the name stuck. Until about 600 years ago, devils inhabited all of Australia. Today, they live only in Tasmania. And even here, they are fighting to survive. Strange things happen in Tasmania, like falling in love with a savage, bad-breathed, big-toothed scavenger. But that's what happened to Wade Anthony. Wade decided the last icon of the Tasmanian wilderness must not go the same way as the Tasmanian tiger. He became the devil's advocate. He left the National Park Service to dedicate all his time to trying to save the little Tasmanian devil.
These are bones that have been crunched by a Tasmanian devil and cleaned up by a Tasmanian devil. These are the leftover of rufous wallaby leg bones, and you can see this is a jawbone of a rufous wallaby. Now, a rufous wallaby makes up a fairly primary diet of the Tasmanian devil. So we know that devils, you can see that there's it's an active game trail by the markings on the ground and obvious evidence of the bones. So devils are moving through here, and we will locate a camera on the tree just beside the game trail, and we should be able to pick up photographs of devils.
On the way home, Wade gets a call to tell him that a devil has been hit by a car. At night, they frequently scavenge roadkill, which saves them from hunting live animals. But sometimes they become the roadkill.
He's a prime breeding animal and in fantastic body condition, so it's a shame to see him killed.
Wade examines him for signs of the facial cancer, but this animal is healthy.
I am affected to see them killed on the road. When the population was at 150,000, then it wasn't a major concern. It was inevitable it was going to happen, that animals would be killed on the road just because they were in such high numbers. Now, with the demise or the shrinking population, it's a real shame to see them killed on the road. It really is. I mean, the devils need all the help they can get at the moment for the survival of the species.
At the foot of Cradle Mountain, Waldheim Chalet was constructed of rustic natural materials by the plant-loving Austrian Gustav Weindorfer. Together with his wife Kate, a century ago they built this humble hostel so that other people could experience the exquisite wilderness for themselves. Many did come to this secluded resort, enjoying the warm hospitality of the botanist couple. Gustav preached to his guests that this precious area should be protected by being made into a national park. During the First World War, Gustav suffered 2 tragedies. First, his wife died, and then because of his Austrian origins, he was accused of being a spy, although he'd been an enthusiastic Australian for decades. Weindorfer was vindicated when he learned in 1922 that at last the area between Cradle Mountain and Lake St Clair had been designated as a national park. Today, the waterways of the southwest are travelled by a different breed of pioneer, men on a mission to help save one of the rarest creatures on Earth. Biologist Jim Thomas is one of the leaders.
The orange-bellied parrot is very endangered. There are less than 200 birds in the wild, and they're all found in southwest Tasmania.
The parrot breeds only here and migrates across the storm-swept Bass Strait to winter on the Australian mainland. It's fallen victim to feral predators like cats, and its mainland feeding grounds have been reduced by development. 3 state governments and national park scientists have joined forces to save these precious parrots. The birds are now being bred in captivity, where they're being prepared for the wild. The idea is to release them to this remote corner of Tasmania, where they once flocked in their thousands. Today, birds will taste freedom for the first time, although it's not quite that easy. For several weeks, they've been acclimatising in one of the world's most remote bird cages, and now it's roundup time.
All right, who have we got here? He's really well coloured up. And look at that orange breast. He's black W, so he was bred in Tasmania.
The little parrots are tagged, so their movements can be tracked over the precarious journey ahead. But these parrots have to learn to be wild again. Feeding tables are provided until they learn how to find grass seed for themselves. This is a rare opportunity for Jim to observe the parrots, and every move is scrutinised.
I rate the success of the program quite high. Birds have been captive bred, they've been released here, and we've had birds come back. So we are getting the results we want, and to improve those results, we need to concentrate our efforts more on captive breeding and releasing of the orange-bellied parrot.
Eventually they make that final leap and fly away. While the orange-bellied parrot struggles to survive, so does the cranky little Tasmanian devil. Although the devil is the emblem of Tasmania and famous with tourists, hardly anyone gets to see one in daylight. So Wade created a tourist attraction and bought land adjacent to the national park, and slowly got the animals used to being active in the daytime.
Okay, folks, as you can see, there's a few devils moving around out there. These guys are primarily a nocturnal species in the wild. Well, in the wild, they're, let's say, fully nocturnal. So most people don't get to see them in the wild because of that reason.
Wade handles the orphan devils until they become tame, like little Aussie, who has become the star attraction at the Cradle Mountain Devil Park. A fearsome carnivorous beast is transformed into a cute little animal that you can touch and pet.
So this little guy, his name is Aussie.
Like the Tasmanian tiger, devils were hunted by farmers because they suspected them of killing calves and lambs. They became protected not long after the Tasmanian tiger became extinct. In proportion to its size, the Tasmanian devil has the strongest jaws in the entire animal kingdom.
Probably 8 or 9 is the maximum size they reach.
It's an eating machine and can consume 40% of its own weight in half an hour.
Devils are a solitary creature. In the wild, they live on their own, but they are a social feeder. So they're an opportunistic feeding animal. So if one devil makes a kill or finds a carcass, pretty soon another one's going to smell it or hear devils squabbling over it, and there'll soon be more than one animal feeding on it. You've probably heard that devils are an aggressive animal. They're not particularly aggressive, they're just highly competitive. And as I said, it's generally for food or the right to mate. As a young boy, I grew up with Tasmania's wilderness as my backyard, and my father used to take me out every weekend. We would go camping, either fishing or bushwalking, camping, as I said, and we would come across a lot of different animals that lived in Tasmania and a lot of endemic species. So I soon realised that, Tasmania was quite a special place and we had a lot of wonderful things here.
Where could an animal possibly exist that had webbed claws, a duck's bill, a beaver's tail, and lays eggs and feeds milk to its young? The virgin waterways of Tasmania are a prime refuge to the platypus, Australia's unique egg-laying mammal. The platypus hunts insect larvae by sensing their electric fields with highly effective receptors in its bill. When the first specimens of the platypus arrived back in London in the late 18th century, they were declared hoaxes. For more than 100 years, experts argued over whether it was a bird or a beast. Eventually, in 1884, it was officially declared in a worldwide telegram that it was a whole new category, the monotreme. The only other monotremes are the echidnas. The echidna probes for ants and insect larvae. Both these monotremes have thrived in Tasmania, where they remained isolated from outside influence. But the same can't be said for the Tasmanian devils. In 1996, a photographer made a horrifying discovery in the Tasmanian forest. One picture he took showed strange areas of swelling around the mouth of a devil, the symptom of a contagious disease now known as DFTD, devil facial tumour disease. A devil task force was established to try and get a picture of the progression of DFTD. The devil population that recently was so numerous has been reduced to the status of an endangered species. Shut off from their familiar environment, these normally aggressive animals are generally calm when trapped in this way. Some even go to sleep. Team leader Samantha Fox handles the wild animals with great care.
On the side. 982.
Noise upsets them, anything that they're not really sure about. And a lot of the noises that they're going to experience while they're here with us, they haven't heard before. So people's voices, some of the really crunchy, crinkly stuff, it's all new stuff to them that they haven't heard before. So you try and, where possible, lessen the human part of the experience for them.
Never mind.
In addition to a general health check, the team records the size and age of the animals, and they give the devils names.
What are you going to pick, Pearl?
We'll call him Clyde.
Clyde.
Yep.
Great.
Paul and Clyde. Can cross that off the list. We're hoping to fill these.
As apex predator, the devil is very important for the entire balance of the Tasmanian habitat. If it should become extinct, another less popular successor could likely take its place.
I guess one of the pressing things that people are most worried about in Tasmania is the presence of the fox. And they're worried that if we lose too many devils, that allows a gap in a niche for devils, for foxes to infiltrate further into Tasmania.
It is pleasing that all the animals examined so far have been in good health. A quick picnic lunch and a phone call from the only place to get mobile reception. They are back at work. They are careful to clean every trap thoroughly so they do not become contaminated. And then case number 35. They've caught a good strong female. But when Sam looks in her mouth, she is devastated to find a small swelling on the fixed palate. This devil is infected.
We take an average of 3 for each. So I'll hold the lip open if you can take the measurements and give them to Pearl.
They take samples for analysis. The cause of DFTD is now believed to be related to a single infected female. But the cancer has spread because of lack of genetic diversity in the small devil population.
This is probably a little further into the site than I was expecting it to be, but you know, it's very hard to tell. You can't. It's not really a case of expectation, and that's. You talk about a disease front and you sort of think that it's going to be, a lot of people would imagine that when you talk about a disease front it's going to be a straight line and it's moving across the state in a straight line, and it's never going to be like that. It's going to be highly variable depending on habitat, on abundance of devils, on a whole lot of other things.
After the examination, Sam releases the female, revealing the wounds from the constant battles that many Tasmanian devils suffer. Scientists believe that the devils transmit the disease by constantly biting each other when eating and mating. Whatever the cause, the disease has spread remorselessly through the devil population in less than 20 years. And so far, nothing can be done to stop it. It's predicted that unless the spread of the disease is stopped, extinction in the wild will occur within 35 years. On the extreme west of the island, remote and almost uninhabited, is the only place left where the devils don't suffer from DFTD. These healthy devils gave local farmer Jeff Taylor an idea. And now people come to this region just to dine with the devil.
To attract Tasmanian devils to a viewing site, the first thing you need is a very healthy population of devils in the landscape. And then the other thing you need is some techniques to attract them to a site. So I collect roadkill, I leave it out in front of a shack, this old fishing shack that we use as a hide, and I also drag a scent trail through the landscape on the nights that I try and show people the devil.
Jeff opened his Devil's Beach restaurant 5 years ago for this uniquely Tasmanian dining experience. While everything looks improvised, as though it's on its first day, this is part of its special charm. A final spotlight check, and all is ready to go. A baby monitor allows us to hear the devils cracking the bones, while the guests enjoy their own haute cuisine inside the restaurant.
I never expected when I started showing people Tasmanian devils that I would become fascinated by them. I'd had a farmer's view that they were a stinking filthy animal. As it's turned out, they're an intriguing animal, one of the most intriguing animals I've ever seen in my life. And so every night I come down here, and this is night number 1010, I'm excited.
The Devil's Restaurant caters for both humans and animals. The first guests arrive at sunset.
And we'll shut the door so we don't let any mosquito. This one? No.
While the other guests arise and start roaming around and looking for food.
We'll keep the light on for a little while, but then later on we'll have a candle and we'll watch through the window and turn everything down low. Okay, take a seat. I need to check my lights and things. Here's some reading material.
While inside, the humans enjoy the fine aromas of French cheese, Italian bread and Australian red wine. Outside, a dead wallaby radiates its own seductive aroma. Some guests come back for a second visit.
We came here 8 years ago, and it was in a guidebook that
From 8 years ago?
From 8 years ago, which we were rereading prior to coming here for this visit. And
it was
we
only
saw
like
it
a
there.
week before we left, and I thought, wow, that sounds fantastic.
We researched it a bit and looked at it, and then called. And very similarly, happily, he was going out.
It was the right night.
We called 2 days ago, and it was perfect.
Suddenly, a crackle comes through the baby monitor. A single female on the prowl. The rich aroma of the roadkill tantalises her palate. While the devils may prefer dining alone, their raucous appreciation of the meal soon attracts other guests. Devils have long facial whiskers to give them a sense of personal space. As long as everyone keeps their distance, they can gorge quite happily in a group. But when whiskers brush, all hell breaks loose. Tempers fly and fangs tear into live flesh. It is this secret observation of the wilderness up close that guests love so much about the Devil's Restaurant.
This is a beetroot dip.
Okay.
Australians have beetroot in everything.
The Devils are also gorging themselves on Tasmania's famous organic produce. If the Tasmanian Devil was to disappear from the forests of the island, there is only one other endemic predator that could possibly fill its niche. The wedge-tailed eagle, a far more elegant scavenger. Bill Brown's home is perched on an empty hilltop, like an eagle's eyrie. And Bill is the bird's biggest fan. In an outdoor enclosure near his house, he's reared a wounded young female. Bill has prepared her for years to return to the wild, but so far in vain. The updrafts of this windy hill make it an ideal place to teach large birds to fly, but she seems reluctant.
Icarus was found when she was about 6 weeks old. Her nest was burnt by a wildfire in state forest in the north of the state, and she was found by some forestry workers, and they contacted me, and she was singed but otherwise unharmed, and I've had her and raised her since then.
Bill is dedicated to the education of his eagle. But despite his work, she still retains her wild spirit. Bill is one of the top raptor experts in the country and works as a ranger for Tasmanian national parks.
My initial hope was to release her as soon as possible when she would normally have fledged. However, because her feathers were damaged from the fire, her first lot of flight feathers were shorter than normal, and usually young eagles have slightly longer feathers than adults, which gives them a really distinctive advantage when they're learning to fly.
Despite all his efforts, Icarus still behaves like the wild creature that she is.
She's certainly aggressive, she's certainly not tame. She could be described as imprinted because she responds to me when I bring food, and imprinting is a difficult thing because they associate humans. She probably associates humans with food, and imprinted birds can, if they're released, can cause problems by being quite aggressive towards humans, expecting to be fed.
Bill has built a special device that allows her to move freely and exercise until she's ready to fly. With a wingspan of up to 2.8 metres, the Tasmanian wedgetail is one of the largest eagles in the world. But Icarus's muscles are not used to flight. Passing wild eagles use the rising thermal airflows to soar to altitudes of more than 1,800 metres. Bill is fascinated by this powerful predator of the skies, but concerned about her future.
Tasmanian eagle is endangered for a number of reasons. There are lots of human threats acting on the population, and also from more sinister types of human activity like poisoning and shooting.
No other populations of wedge-tailed eagles are threatened with extinction in Australia, but they are in Tasmania.
A perception within the particularly sheep industry that eagles were a major predator of live, healthy lambs. Many years ago, studies have been done and they found that less than 5% were taken by eagles, and then the majority of those that were taken were sick or dying.
The wedgetail has never had it so good since the rabbit was brought here by Europeans. But numbers of eagles are decreasing through hunting, while the rabbit has become one of the most destructive feral pests throughout Australia. Icarus gets her second lesson of the day, and the strong wind is favourable. She flies at least 100 metres, which for her is a great success. The young eagle feels the wind in her feathers and tries again. Bill hopes to release Icarus soon. He would love to watch her soar effortlessly up where she belongs with her wild eagle kin. The basalt columns of Barn Bluff stand like organ pipes in the cathedral of nature. Created from the molten lava at the dawn of Tasmania, millions of years ago. The mountain landscape is the domain of the wombat. This peaceful, bear-like marsupial lives in burrows that they dig with their sharp claws. Wombats eat the grasses and sedges of the mountain meadows and have a very slow metabolism. They can take up to a fortnight to digest a single meal. And after all that time, it comes out in cubes. Wherever they go, they leave ample evidence of their passage, treating fences as minor obstacles, and marking their territory with their distinctive briquettes. Their natural enemies are Tasmanian devils and eagles, and no doubt the thylacine also preyed on them. But they have their defences. The rump of the wombat is covered with a very tough, thick hide, which protects them from the teeth and claws of its attacker. It's also capable of crushing its enemies against the burrow roof. It's spring in the Tasmanian Highlands, baby time. Wade Anthony observes this timeless wilderness every day from the simple house he built with his own hands. Sometimes he brings wounded animals home. When a devil is hit by a car, the mother often dies, but the little baby can survive in the pouch. Many of these are brought to Wade. He rears the young devils with a special milk formula, sold in Tasmania just for feeding marsupials.
Your little teeth are growing. Oops, oops, oops. And some more?
These two will have plenty of time to practice because Wade will have to do this twice a day for the next 3 months.
Willem, as we've called him, was found on the edge of the road with his sister next to his mother, which had been killed on the road. Unfortunately, his sister didn't make it through the night, but Willem, he was the stronger of the two, obviously, and he managed to survive the crucial 24, 48 hours. He was brought into us 24 hours after he was found. And luckily for Willem, he took to the bottle very, very quickly. So this was a really positive sign. Once they take to the bottle, then generally speaking, they're away, and you shouldn't have too many problems with them.
The second largest predator on the island, also a marsupial, is the spotted tail quoll.
I'm going to try and catch this male spotted tail quoll. He's about 3.5 years old, so he's in his absolute prime. He's quite a large animal. Spotted tail quolls are quite difficult to handle because they're very, very fast and agile. And they have a nice set of teeth as well. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful. And they're quite difficult to catch, so we might have a bit of fun here for a little while. It's all right.
Some species of the Australian mainland quoll are now extinct, but the birth rate in Wade's sanctuary is high and the future is hopeful. Quolls often have to be moved from enclosure to enclosure for breeding. But first they have to be caught.
Whoa, 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 settle. That was my opportunity. I missed my opportunity.
Despite all his experience, Wade doesn't succeed. He needs help. Spotted tail quolls are the Australian equivalent of a native cat. They tear birds and small kangaroos to pieces with their teeth and claws, and they are excellent climbers. Despite their cute appearance, they were always hunted by farmers.
This is where it could be dangerous.
Although they enjoy a more sympathetic reputation, than the Tasmanian Devil, they are just as ruthless a predator.
Can you put that underneath you? Oh, we got him. As you can see, they're very fast, very agile, and take a bit of catching sometimes. Thanks, Nicole. For the meantime, I'll place him in this trap. Hopefully.
The quoll's bite muscles aren't as strong as the devil's, but they don't give up, not even in a bag.
Yeah.
Wade started a one-man company 5 years ago. Now he is sought after throughout Tasmania for quolls and devils. Delicate actions, such as procedures with pregnant devils, he likes to do himself.
She's a protective mother. This is Ossa, named after Mount Ossa, tallest mountain in Tasmania. She's a first-time mother. She's a 2-year-old. She's a very nice little devil, but any mother worth of salt is going to become protective. So today we're going to relocate Ossa and her 4 offspring down to a new enclosure where she gets a bit more sun.
Life is not easy for young devils. A mother delivers up to 30 minute babies in one litter, each one no heavier than a few tenths of a gram. She has only 4 teats inside her pouch. Only the 4 strongest babies get any milk. The rest are eaten by their mother. The 4 who have made it this far know how to fight to survive. Now it's time to put them in an outdoor enclosure. For 100 days, these 4 youngsters have done nothing more than to hang on tight to their mother's nipples. Unlike their cousin, the kangaroo, the young devils will never return to the pouch for sanctuary. Although they will continue to suckle from their mother. Ossa is brought to join her babies. But when she's put into the new enclosure, she feels disoriented and a bit insecure.
Hello, Gil. Hello. It's all right.
And she wonders
They're
what
here.
Wade has done with her joeys.
They're in here. Persistent. That's the quickest way out. Thinking around Christmas time or very early in the new year, the young will be fully off milk. They'll be on purely meat and water. And once this occurs, Mum's done her job. They're becoming increasingly difficult for her. And one night she'll just leave the den and won't come back. I have a 2-year-old daughter. She's been introduced to Willem, the little Tasmanian devil I'm hand rearing, and she seems to really like devils, so So who knows, maybe, I'm sure over the years as she grows older she'll spend more and more time here, and yeah, maybe one day she'll manage the place.
That way.
You have to be gentle, remember? Very gentle, very gentle.
That way.
When Wade left school, he was a successful athlete, but he found himself investing more and more energy into working with animals.
Tiens, doucement, bébé. Tiens, pas trop fort.
Holding him? There we go.
On a trip to North America, he met a French-Canadian doctor, now his partner.
Good boy. Good boy.
Donne-lui un câlin. Donne-lui un câlin.
Both encourage their daughter to love animals. But the difference between animal and toy is still a work in progress.
Do you like Willem?
We're gonna put it in the box.
You're going to put him in the box?
Well, Vicky still wants milk.
You can put him in the box.
Almost everything in Wade's life is somehow involved in the wildlife of Tasmania. He tries hard to maintain a healthy work-life balance.
Okay, you have to close the door quickly, okay? Eddie, help me close the door.
But if his daughter is going to take over the family business, she needs plenty of practice in putting wild animals in and out of enclosures.
Bravo. Good girl, man. One of the myths is it's a savage beast. It's an animal that's going to attack you in the wild. We hear this every day. This is simply not true. This myth has come about because, one, it's called a Tasmanian devil, and every photograph or bit of footage you see, the devil's got its mouth open and it's roaring and screaming. But in reality, they're a very, very shy animal, and they're a species that most people aren't lucky enough to see in the wild because of that fact. They're incredibly shy.
On his days off, Wade likes to get on the water. Instead of going fishing this weekend, he decides to take his family on an eagle spotting expedition.
There's a pair of sea eagles that live just up here on the river. We see them pretty much daily. They come over and looking for food, obviously, so I'm just checking to see.
Today, there's no sign of the sea eagles, but the family gets a reward. A wedgetail. Perhaps it's Icarus that has found her wings at last and is soaring the ragged ridges of this ancient remnant of Gondwana. The Cradle Mountain, Lake St Clair National Park. Australia, the oldest, most extreme continent on Earth. Nowhere else do you find snakes more venomous, wildlife more bizarre. Over tens of thousands of years, people have adapted to this untamed land. They have endured its extremes and gradually learned to love it. From the rich jungle to the red desert to the snowy mountains. But in this vast island of wild beauty, the crowning jewels are Australia's national parks. It's winter in the Australian Alps, and the cold fronts roll in from the Great Southern Ocean to spread a soft blanket of white over an old snow gum. This gnarled and twisted veteran has survived more than 300 alpine winters. It's the hardiest of all eucalypts, and it thrives in icy conditions at high altitude. They grow slowly and never much over 30 metres. But they carry a heavy burden, which they shed by bending their branches to dump the freezing load. It's one of a few evergreen trees that survives in the snow and ice of the Australian Alps. Near Mount Kosciuszko, Australia's highest mountain, the winter temperature can fall to minus 20 degrees Celsius with a savage wind chill. It's a harsh endurance test for both plants and animals. While some animals go into semi-hibernation, the marsupial wombat is active throughout the winter. This usually nocturnal animal is foraging during the day because of the shortage of food. The relentless winter evenings can be just a little too cold. Deep snow cover makes it hard for him to find food. But today is perfect winter wombat weather. Sun shining on his thick fur, snow blanketing his underground burrow, and a thaw that exposes bare patches and running water. Wombats are strong animals. They dig tunnels with their sharp claws, which make excellent crampons, and can scrape away the icy crust to find food. The Snowy Mountains, as they are called, are the highest part of the Great Dividing Range, which stretches 3,500 kilometres along the entire east coast of the continent, from tropical North Queensland to Victoria. It is the third longest mountain range in the world. Only this one small section, however, has high mountains and winter snow. These ancient craggy peaks are a big attraction for skiers. It's not as steep as the European Alps, but it's wide and perfect for cross-country skiing in the wilderness. Once much more high and mighty, ice and time have ground these ancient mountains down. The Snowy Mountains are home to thousands of wild horses, originally brought here by European farmer settlers. In the Australian Alps, they're affectionately known as brumbies. It was this high country that gave birth to the legend of the man from Snowy River. The rugged mountain men and the wild horses that they chased inspired Banjo Patterson's iconic bush ballad. Generations of Australians have since been raised on this tale of outback courage. It's part of the national folklore.
So Clancy rode to wheel them, He was racing on the wing, where the best and boldest riders take their place. And he raced his stock horse past them, and he made the ranges ring with the stock whip as he met them face to face. Then he halted for a moment while he swung the dreaded lash. But they saw their well-loved mountain full in view, and they charged beneath the stock whip with a sharp and sudden dash, and off into the mountain scrub they flew.
The stockman's history on these mountains is merely a blink in time for the Alps. Their geological history goes back more than 600 million years, making them far older than the European Alps and the Himalayas. By the end of September, the snow melts and the rivers flow, providing water for the first green shoots of spring. The echidna comes out of his winter torpor. For animals and farmers alike, grazing begins in earnest. A number of people around the national park still earn their living with the brumbies. Glenn Simmons is the classic Aussie bushman. Like the snowy mountains where he lives, he's open, tough and weathered. Glenn, nicknamed Simo, loves the brumbies.
What? That's just what they're used to coming to. You know, when they're not in sight, they come when they hear that noise. Yeah. But the two over the back are brumbies, right? Genuine, untouched. I mean, how beautiful is it to see brumbies at your doorstep? You know, it doesn't get much better than that, does it?
Simo's property is adjacent to the park. He used to catch wild horses on behalf of the National Park Service. He'd be on the road for weeks at a time, building traps and luring the horses with salt licks. He brought many of the brumbies home to break in and sell. Simo and his wife Julie still have to make a living. So now they've worked out a way to persuade the brumbies to come to them. Life in the bush is not always easy, especially in winter. But their isolation has proved how much they rely on each other.
Julie actually, you know, even with the fresh brumbies, because she feeds them on the bike all the time, they get used to the noise of the bike, they get used to Julie's voice, and they come around quite quick. Really, I think it's the female thing. The horses seem to love the female attention, they really do. And as far as that little mare's concerned, Julie just feeds her and brushes her and plays with her, and she thinks, oh, this is all right. But whereas when Glenn comes, there's a bit more action, you know.
Simo thrives on domesticating the legendary horses of the Kosciuszko National Park. The rugged terrain and its challenging climate means only the fittest and strongest animals survive. In Simo's opinion, a lame wild horse needs no doctoring. Just regular running exercise will soon see it right.
I like them because of their temperament. You know, their temperament is always so gentle and, you know, they might act like they're wild first up, but once they're really caught and broke in, they become very quiet.
Simo and Julie run a website where people can find brumbies for sale. Some of these hardy specimens are especially suitable for children to ride.
He hasn't done too bad, you know.
He's done great. He hasn't done anything wrong. Not yet. She's the type that we break in for kids, but, you know, that takes 18 months, 2 years to get them guaranteed quiet enough for kids. As much as they become friendly quick, you know, it's teaching them all the things that kids will do. Walk up behind them, want to give them carrots and bread, and really sort of teach them just to be kid-friendly. I just want to adjust that down so it's not too tight in his mouth to start with. It's way too tight.
Tell him how good a horse he is.
Oh, you're a good horse. Little champion. I'll call you Toffee. Sweetest Toffee. Good boy.
He and Julie live simply in the bush. They have a generator for electricity, bottled gas, and a water pond right at the front door. In remote rural Australia, most people live like this.
Got a coffee made.
Yeah, love one.
They've raised their 3 children here, and 2 of them have families of their own now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure they'll take it.
That'd be good.
Well, that's a brumby that just comes into the salt. He's just wandering around on his own. He's just a young brumby stallion. Hasn't got a mob. So he's just a bachelor at the moment. So he'll eventually get older and get a few mares and get his own family.
The Australian Alps National Parks are made up of 11 nature reserves that cover the only high alpine habitat on this vast continent. But the endemic plants have not evolved to cope with the hard hooves of introduced grazing animals such as horses and cattle. The brumby population in the Alpine National Parks is said to be unsustainable at well over 15,000 and growing at 20% a year. Brumby's hooves damage the sensitive mountain terrain. The results are severe erosion and the destruction of rare plant habitats. The treeless slopes of Mount Kosciuszko are particularly vulnerable, with only a thin and fragile soil cover. In 2003, the Parks Administration was forced to intervene. Brumbies were shot from helicopters. But public protest soon put a stop to this drastic form of population control. Rangers now trap 300 wild horses a year. They erect temporary pens and bait them with salt licks, hay and molasses. When the horses enter the pen to tug on the straw bales, the latch trips, shutting the gate behind them. When the alpine pastures are free of ice and snow again, the eastern grey kangaroos return to graze. They can grow to be almost 2 metres tall and live in large mobs in the most inaccessible parts of the park. They raise their joeys in the pouch for 9 months. The big males can weigh up to 90 kilos. These magnificent animals can jump up to 6 metres in a single bound and travel at more than 50 kilometres an hour. And they have enough endurance to travel for hours. Amphibians also emerge in spring. Found only in the Alps, the rare corroboree frog is named for its markings, which resemble Aboriginal body painting. But unlike most frogs, it doesn't jump, and it doesn't swim. Sadly, the exceptional corroboree frog is on Australia's most endangered list. The blossoms on the snow gums are sought after for their nectar. Many birds also return to the mountain forest when spring arrives, to feed on the bush flowers and insects. The sulphur-crested cockatoo is a large and versatile parrot, common throughout eastern Australia. The beautiful gang cockatoo, however, is not so adaptable. Its numbers are in drastic decline. New Holland honeyeaters arrive for the spring flower nectar. It gets noisy in the bush when the lyrebird does his spring mating dance. This almost flightless bird is one of the most remarkable creatures in southeastern Australia. He not only has his metre-long tail feathers to impress the ladies, but also his extraordinary voice. Lyrebirds can mimic just about any other bird in the bush. They can pass this mimicry down through the generations. In modern times, lyrebirds have been known to impersonate car alarms, chainsaws, and even mobile phones. These high alpine boulder fields, snow-covered in winter, are the habitat of the extremely rare mountain pygmy possum. Linda Broom has studied these shy animals for nearly 40 years. Until a few decades ago, they were thought to be extinct. But 2 small populations were then found surviving in the Alps. And recently, Linda found a 3rd one. She noticed that this rock formation was similar to their other known habitats. She also noted the presence of bogong moths, the tiny marsupial's favourite food. Linda and her assistant put out traps, padded with soft material and baited with walnuts.
Possums like to be under the shelter of rocks. Where the bogong moths are, the bogong moths accumulate in these areas, so we put the traps in a little space where the possums are running through the boulders at night, and they come upon the trap. And the walnuts actually taste and smell a bit like bogong moths, which is why we use walnuts. So we put those in the traps and put the little trap down a hole where the possums might be running, looking for moths. And we hope they go into the trap.
The probability of discovering even more of the rare marsupials in this location increase when she also finds their favourite food plant.
This is mountain plum pine. It grows on the rocks. It's actually a pine tree, and it has little green seeds. So what the possum does is hold the seed in the corner of its mouth and cut the seed across the middle. But a bush rat will hold the seed in both hands on each side of its mouth and use its front teeth to cut the seed lengthwise. So you can tell if you pick up the seed husks from the ground whether a possum's eaten it or a bush rat's eaten it.
Bogong moths are attracted to lights at night. Linda installs a trap to try and find the size of the moth population in this spot. Linda is one of only a few scientists who have closely studied this rare marsupial possum. Her work has had one or two surprising turns.
I used to tell my students and volunteers they taste like walnuts, and they said, "How do you know?" And I hadn't actually tried them, so then I had to live up to my words and taste them. We did a cook-up that night, and we made a stir-fry of bogong moths, and they do taste like walnuts, very oily. But I pulled the wings off, I couldn't eat the wings.
Some friends of Linda's have a farm and horses near the park. Linda takes every opportunity she can to get out into the countryside. She always learns something that helps with her scientific observations.
It is lovely to see wild horses galloping across the mountains. You see a brumby, a feral horse, rearing up a little stallion and being very proud and striking at the air, and it does tug at the heartstrings. So, in a way, there's a small place for it, but we do need to keep it in areas that are not going to be damaged. There are areas in the subalpine, and there's also areas outside the park that we can have horses in as well, and some of the state forests. So there is a place for it, but it needs to be controlled very carefully so that we're not damaging the native environment with these horses.
During the brief alpine summer, these montane grasslands become a glorious carpet of rare wildflowers. Many of these delicate species grow nowhere else on Earth. The summer heat also produces violent thunderstorms in the mountains. Flash floods cause streams to rise quickly. Remote areas can be cut off for days from the outside world. The four-wheel drive is an essential vehicle in the wilderness, where biologist Ken Green does his all-weather explorations of the park.
This is more like the weather I'd expect in April, but having said that, I've been doing this now regularly for the past 15 years, and I think this would have to be the wettest February that I've ever done it for. So usually I'm complaining because it's too hot, too dry, there's too many snakes, too dusty, the animals are getting stressed in the traps because of the heat, whereas today it's, yeah, you get that on big jobs.
Ken set his traps in the bush 2 days ago. The animal he's looking for is a marsupial rat.
This one's a broad-toothed rat. I've just checked it. It's an adult by the looks of it. And so I'm just going to get it into the bag. Being a rodent, they can give you a bit of a bite. And come on, matey. No, go the other way. Dan's not behaving.
Due to Ken's work, the broad-toothed rat is one of the most closely studied rodents in Australia. Fossil evidence indicates that this animal originally lived throughout the whole eastern half of the continent, although it prefers cold winters and wet summers. This suggests that the climate in this notoriously hot country was once very different.
And I've now got the animal in a grip where it can't actually bite me. Now this is a female. Now she's behaving herself quite nicely. With the drying and the warming of the continent, these animals have become restricted to basically fairly, the cold, wet sites. So this is the ideal conditions for them. And they're slow, fairly gentle animals. They get eaten by foxes, and things are getting warmer and drier, so they're definitely under threat. Now she wants to go, and she's off.
Ken's yield is unusually poor. It seems that the weather is too wet, even for the broad-toothed rats. But he still has to check his 40 traps every 2 days. The animals can't survive in them any longer than that. He finds a surprise guest, a female marsupial mouse. The males, by this time, have all died of exhaustion after the rigours of the mating season.
With this weather, there's probably not as many as I would have expected. With the rain and the wind, they probably all stayed in bed overnight, which is probably what I should have done as well. Yeah.
The Australian Alps date back to the time of the breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana. It divided into Australia, South America, India, Africa and Antarctica. An enormous volcanic magma bubble raised the Earth's crust to form a giant plateau, which then collapsed in the middle. One part sank into the sea, but one edge of the escarpment was preserved as the east coast of Australia. After breakup, the Gondwana continental landmasses then ground together, causing further violent uplift. But that jagged new mountain chain has since been sculpted by wind, water and ice over a geological age. The Aborigines inhabited the valleys along the riverbeds. Every summer the tribes met on the high peaks to feast on the bogong moths. They drove the insects from the caves with smoke, then turned them into protein-rich flat breads that sustained them for months. Among the rounded granite boulders of the mountains, this miniature kangaroo feels right at home. Yellowfoot rock wallabies can jump up to 4 metres and were once hunted for their beautiful fur. Today, they are at the mercy of introduced foxes and feral cats. In the Australian alpine region, they live in small scattered groups of up to 20 animals. The strongest males vie for mating rights. They are notable for spectacular aerial combat, which alternates between play and deadly earnest. But if you lose, there's plenty of time to contemplate a new strategy. A warm, early summer evening. But at night, it's still cold. In the pure mountain air, the stars blaze with a special intensity. The melting snow brings plenty of water to the meadows. The lush wild grasses provide a feast for wombats. These are the most serene of all marsupials. They would seem an easy target for predators. Their rear is protected by thick hide and fur, but their claws are deadly for frontal attack. The alpine pastures are good grazing for horses too. But few wild brumbies are lucky enough to fall into Simo's gentle hands. He's just finished training a new bunch of horses, and now it's time to find them homes. A mother brings an eager young rider to meet his new pony.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Glenn, Carol and Jaden. Hi, how you going?
Kel, Jaden,
Glenn.
how are you? This is Goliath.
Hey, Goliath.
A nice little pony, isn't he? You reckon you could ride him?
Yep.
You could. We better put a saddle on him well and see if you can.
9-year-old Jaden is already a keen horseman. Now he's about to ride his very own Kosciuszko Brumby for the first time.
I'll get you on, and then I'll get on that other little mare, but she's only been rode a couple of times, so you'll just have to watch her a bit.
Yep.
Ready? Go! Sit. Ready. Rein. All right, you just have a little ride round on him, see how you get along with him, and I'll get my one ready. All right, you feel good?
Yep.
Take your time with him till you get the feel. Rightio, you right to go?
Yep.
All right. Just jump something for you, mate. Like a little log.
These are the moments Simo lives for. He loves to pass on his philosophy of life to the next generation.
All right.
His passion for mutual coexistence between man and nature in this big wild land is embodied for him in a relationship with the Brumby. The Pygmy possum is the only marsupial that stores food for the winter. Although these tiny animals were once widespread, they are now restricted to a few high alpine locations. Yet another casualty of habitat destruction and feral foxes and cats. Linda Broom and her colleague set their traps 2 days ago.
So we should have walked the other side.
She's hoping to find some today in a new location.
It's number 15. Possum. Looks like a bigger one too.
This tiny marsupial looks at first sight like a rodent. It's the only mammal to live all year round above 1400 metres altitude.
It's an icon of the Alps because it's the only animal that's restricted to above the snow line in Australia. It's very specialised. It feeds on the bogong moths, which migrate here during the summertime and leave for the winter. And also the mountain plum pines that you can see growing around us are also restricted to these rocky areas. So it's like a unique little ecosystem that's the possum and the bogong moths and the plum pines.
The pygmy possum's life is adapted to the short alpine summer. The female produces a litter of 6. They leave their mother's pouch after 2 months. Then the offspring are on their own, with only a few more weeks before the start of winter.
Well, the biggest problem, of course, is climate change and what's happening with the declining snow cover, because these animals need the snow. When the possums hibernate, they drop their body temperature from 37 degrees down to 2 degrees when they're hibernating, and the environment under the snow stays at about 2 degrees as long as you've got about a metre of snow. But when you start losing that snow, it can get to temperatures here at Charlotte Pass down to -20. Making a little...
Linda notes that the animals are getting thinner year by year.
Slightly lighter, that's 45, so it'll be 26 grams.
Pygmy possums no longer have enough to eat when they wake up hungry from their winter semi-hibernation. With less snow and shorter winters, the snow melts before the bogongs reach the mountains. So the possums are dying of malnutrition. Bogong moths could be described as the most important species of the entire alpine region. The fat, protein-rich insects migrate every spring from the hot lowlands to the mountains for their cool summer refuge. The birds and the animals of the Alps and the local Aboriginal people all sought out their hiding places for a guaranteed source of nutritious food. Park biologist Ken Green spends both summers and winters in the mountains. He knows the whole region better than anyone.
Well, basically, once you come sort of out of the Himalayas, coming south, there's really not much until you get to New Zealand in terms of mountains that support snow. So I think that's the main thing about these mountains is, so suddenly in the lowest, flattest, driest continent on Earth, you have plants and animals that have to be able to adapt to snow.
Ken climbs a steep hill above Dead Horse Gap. He never knows what treasures he might find up here. With many rocky crevices, this is typical habitat for bogong moths. A striking arrangement of jagged rocks catches his attention. He discovers a hole just big enough for him to crawl through.
I just have this thing where I tend to crawl into holes. If I see a hole in rocks, I tend to crawl in and see what's there. So this was just one of those many cases. There were bogong moth remains outside, so that was a good hint that there was something inside. So it's a bit of a squeeze, but went in, took a look, and there was probably 100,000 or so moths lined up in front of me. Yeah.
Bogong moths generally shun daylight. They spend their days resting under large, cool rocks before swarming outside at night. But what Ken discovers in this cave surpasses all his expectations. Bogong moths cover every inch of the cave interior. They have obviously been migrating to this cool secret place for centuries.
Why they come to particular caves, we don't really know. Obviously they come back, or at least some moths come back to the same caves, because on the floor of the cave here where I'm lying there are a number of parasites which remain in the cave. So they're dependent on the moths coming each year. So certainly some moths come back in each year, whether they're moths from the same areas or whether they're just generally moths from all over. Got a moth down there. We don't know, and this year's a particularly good one.
The bogong moths are enormously important to the ecological balance of the entire alpine region.
The basic is, when do they arrive? That's the key to a lot of what's happening here in the mountains. And so each year I record the earliest date of arrival, and then I come up here to look at them just to see roughly what sort of numbers we've got. It's very hard to be exact because these are the easily accessible ones, which means they're the ones that are first eaten by the foxes or the ravens.
A significant problem is that the moths bring farming pesticides from the lowlands in their bodies. As the most concentrated source of protein in the Alps, the moths spread these poisons to almost every level of the food chain. Ken Green has been tracking this disturbing development for years. The Australian Alps National Parks protect the only high alpine habitat on the continent. The many large rocks offer good hiding places and protection from the cold for animals and insects. Bushfires in the more remote regions turn evergreen forests into desolate fields of grey sticks. Fire has been one of nature's cyclic events in this habitat for millions of years. In contrast, the wild brumby herds have only been here for less than 200 years. For many Australians, these horses have a significant cultural heritage value. The brumby is related to the 136,000 horses that were sent to the Great War on behalf of Australia. Only one of those horses came back. Those horses that went to war never came back. But the horses that were left in reserve in Australia were set free, and some became the brumbies. Some people argue that brumbies deserve the same level of recognition and protection that native marsupials, birds and insects receive. The wild horses, therefore, have become a political issue. The trapping program may be more acceptable to the general public than mass shootings from helicopters. But an annual reduction of only 300 brumbies, whether they become pets or pet food, is only a fraction of the yearly increase in the size of the overall population. But for Simo, alpine brumbies are the best horses in the world. With time and patience, they become docile riding animals. Simo could not be happier with his life.
And why would you not want to live on the edge of a national park? And it's got so much to offer, especially Cozzy. I mean, it's such beautiful mountains, beautiful terrain, you know, all the rivers. I've thought about it, but I don't want to be anywhere else. Why would I want to be, you know? No, I don't want to be anywhere else. I travel a bit and I see a lot. But no, my little part of the world's pretty unique in this little corner. So yeah, I've got it pretty good.
Probably another month or so.
From now on, the nights will grow steadily cooler. And then the first frosts and snow will come. In the only part of Australia that can really be called alpine. The problem of the Brumbies, however, will keep the National Park authorities busy for a long time to come. Most people doubt that it can ever really be solved. Australia, the oldest, most extreme continent on Earth. Nowhere else do you find snakes more venomous, wildlife more bizarre. Over tens of thousands of years, people have adapted to this untamed land. They have endured its extremes and gradually learned to love it. From the rich jungle to the red desert to the snowy mountains. But in this vast island of wild beauty, the crowning jewels are Australia's national parks. The red heart of Australia. The legendary outback. This sunburnt country reveals little of the verdant green rainforest that covered it 90 million years ago, when it was part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Australia's curious marsupials are the last living witnesses of that distant past. Why did they thrive here in such numbers and nowhere else? The polished sandstone domes of the Olgas and Uluru are sculpted by the eternal winds of geological time. This site, sacred to the Aboriginals, is guarded by one of the world's largest eagles, the wedgetail. The arid landscape is gouged by occasional violent floods, which subside, leaving the soil struggling to retain moisture. Spinifex grass is a great moisture miser. It grows abundantly in the poor red soil, but tastes like straw, even to the wild camels. Their ancestors were brought here as outback transport in the 19th century. With nearly 1 million camels, Australia now has the biggest population of wild camels in the world. The Australian continent has been an isolated landmass for over 50 million years. Both floods and scorching heat have made it what it is today. But biologist Peter Latz believes the biggest influence of all has been fire.
It burns like crazy. And the heat of the flames is going to push me off the side of the rock and I'm going to fall over. And this is a cold, frosty morning. And just imagine in a hot, windy summer's day, this fuel can just burn away the trees and shrubs. And that's how Spinifex takes over the country. It uses fire to get rid of its competitors and take over the country.
Rather than matches, though, the usual cause of desert wildfires is lightning. In most of Australia, bushfires are common. Years ago, Peter wondered how different this country would have looked without the influence of fire. He studied the fire sensitivity of shrubs, trees and other plants in the area where he grew up and which he knows best. The West MacDonnell Ranges, now a national park near Alice Springs. The parallel ridges of the West MacDonnells form a jagged spine from west to east through the otherwise flat landscape. When fire breaks out on one of the slopes, the wind drives it for miles across the ranges. Only the deep-cut valleys are sometimes spared. As the midday sun beats down, the low-lying areas of the park seem lifeless in the blazing heat. But the grass provides habitat for many insects. There are over 1,200 species of ants in Australia, and for them, it can't be hot enough. Ants are the only source of food for the bizarre thorny devil, a small desert lizard that gobbles up to 750 of them a day. The echidna, an egg-laying mammal, also enjoys the feast of ants. The echidna rummages in rotten logs or digs in the ground for ants and termites. Nature perfected solar power millions of years ago. The blistering heat is ideal for the cold-blooded reptiles. Since they depend on warmth to drive their metabolism and movement, the hot red centre is truly the land of the lizard. The planet's greatest concentration of lizards is here. With lack of water a constant issue, most obtain all the moisture they need from their prey. But a new predator has recently arrived in the district. A formidable and indiscriminate hunter, the feral cat. Over the past 200 years, they have bred in the wild so successfully that up to 10 million feral cats now call Australia home. Feral cats threaten many species of native wildlife with extinction. Biologist Rachel Paltridge is finding out why. She is particularly interested in learning how the common cat can possibly survive, let alone thrive, in the deserts of Central Australia. The red-backed kingfisher is an easy target. under threat, it flees, leaving eggs and young unprotected. Rachel's work has revealed that deserts are a surprisingly good habitat for cats. While cats' rivals, the fox and the dingo, must travel for water during dry times, cats stay and live off the reptiles.
Stop here, stop. Over there.
There's no way that I'd be able to capture cats without that help of the Aboriginal women, but with the Aboriginal women we can always get a cat pretty well when we want it. Cats are not adapted to long distance running. They actually tire out quite quickly. This is how Aboriginal people are able to capture cats, initially following their tracks, then flushing the cat out. The cat is exhausted before the Aboriginal trackers are. Once we've caught a cat, we put the radio collar on it.
Let him go.
Let him go.
I'll leave it here.
Next day, Rachel picks up signals. When they find tracks, the Aboriginal women piece together the cat's story from prints in the sand.
Aboriginal trackers can interpret from its tracks where it's gone, exactly how far it's travelled,
Last night?
how many times it's pounced on prey, what it's eaten, how many times it's sat down, what's happened when it's met other cats, pretty well everything that's happened.
Rachel's work has cast light on how cats can survive in the desert.
I think the fact that cats can survive independent of water is the most important thing that's allowed them to survive right through the deserts.
While the cat has adapted well to this harsh environment, desert bird populations fluctuate enormously depending on the abundance of the season. Wild budgerigars start breeding in huge flocks as soon as there is water and grass seed about. They sweep across the plains in their hundreds of thousands in one of Australia's most spectacular wildlife displays. To many, the outback is an arid wasteland. But Indigenous Australians use it as a vegetable garden. What at first seems like a desolate acacia scrub provides good food for the experienced bushmen, like Peter Latz, who learned from the Aborigines.
So even though this lovely big mulga's dead, we have now a solanum growing up after the fire, and you can see there's lots of flowers on it. And in another month there's going to be, oh, not only another month, look at the fruit on here already. This is bush tomato, it's not ripe yet. I grew up eating this plant and I like it, but it's just like someone eating olives for the first time. They don't think they're very delicious, but once you get used to the taste, good eating as far as I'm concerned. What have we here? This is one of the most important grass seeds in Central Australia. Tiny little seeds, a lot of work. So Aborigines, the women had these coolamans which they used to winnow the seed from the ash and anything else that's in there, and then put it on the grinding stone and grind it up with a bit of water and make like a dough, which you then cook on the ashes, and it's like the bread of the natives. So we're looking at the wheat of the desert here.
Peter is a botanist and a doctor of biology. His publications on the dry habitats of Australia are known internationally. He still goes searching for signs of the original vegetation of the outback.
We're in the middle of what I call a dry jungle. It's just very unusual in the desert to see this vine climbing up the tree, and if we can keep far away from it, it'll go right to the very top. But you can see here the trees are multi-stemmed because it's been burnt in probably 100, 200 years ago, and it's had to resprout from the base.
In his childhood, Peter and his Aboriginal friends roamed the West MacDonnells, searching for nature's treats.
So here's a flower you just pluck at as you walk past, and you can just suck the nice sweet honey out of it.
But which plants are edible and which are toxic? This poisonous plant bears a confusing likeness to the delicious bush tomato.
For the edible things, it's really quite simple. You find the plant and go to the most sensitive part of your skin, which is under your arm, and rub it in there, and if it doesn't sting, then you can try putting it in your mouth. And if it still tastes all right then, well, lucky you've got a pet dingo there, and you can feed him quite a bit of it, and if he doesn't die, then you know that it's edible.
The outback seemed utterly bleak to the first European explorers. For them, the red centre meant only hunger, unbearable heat, and deprivation. But if you understand it like its most iconic resident does, you can find something to eat almost anywhere. The giant red kangaroo is the largest living marsupial in the world. A red kangaroo mother with her offspring. The joey will rely on her milk for a year. They have coped better than many other marsupials and live wherever the trees are to act as shade.
What we have here is the most important plant to the Aborigines, even nowadays. It's used for chewing tobacco. This is a plant that comes up after fire. It's most prolific after fire, and Aborigines probably burnt a lot of country just to produce this plant. They didn't smoke it because it doesn't smoke when it's dried, it just keeps going out. So they got a special ash from different plants and mixed it with the ash and then chewed it, just like chewing tobacco. And what the ash does is actually allow the nicotine to get into your bloodstream easily. You know, the hippies et al., they would like to think it's a psychedelic drug, but actually it's no different to what I'm smoking now.
Peter's grandparents were 19th century German immigrants. The family grew up in the Hermannsburg Lutheran Mission on the edge of the West MacDonnell Ranges. His father was a mechanic. It was here Peter learned about life in the outback, and especially the so-called bush tucker, the food that nature provides, even in the desert.
Yeah, well, I was born here in 1941. Actually born in Alice Springs, but spent my first 12 years of my life here. For a young boy, it was a fantastic life. Because every Saturday we used to, I only had Aboriginal mates at my age, and we'd go out every Saturday fishing down in the Fink or eating bush tuckers and lighting up the spinifex, and sometimes 3 of us on a donkey with no saddle or bridle, just wandering through the bush.
Hermannsburg is still inhabited, with the old village around the church preserved as a museum. The settlement was founded at the end of the 19th century by immigrant missionaries. Young pastor Carl Strelo was one of the few with the necessary stamina to endure this harsh life.
There was 2 church services every Sunday, one in English and one in Aranda. And then Sunday school for us. That's my father, photo of my father, with my great uncle and the boring machine when they were boring to get water. And the machine is still there over in the distance.
Word gets around that Peter has arrived. His old friend Herman comes to see him. He speaks Aranda, the language of the original inhabitants of the West McDonald's region.
We were riding donkeys together when we were young fellas and catching the fish. Herman and I used to go out and spear them, didn't we? Spear them? Yeah. And take netting wire.
Well, we used to walk around.
What I owe the people that brought me up is the fact that they taught me not only bush tucker, but they taught me to be a good observer. And that's held me in really good stead as a scientist. There is a theory that the first 5 years is the important part for your brain. It actually forms pathways. And so my brain is wired more in the Aboriginal way, I think, than the white man's way.
The Dreamtime is the creation story of the Aborigines, and it's still alive today. Legends have passed down from generation to generation about the genesis of the country's hills, canyons, and watercourses. Its sacred landforms mark the Dreamtime's mythic geography. When the rainbow serpent vied with the sun and other great spirits to mould this land, allowing water and life to flow through it. The Goss Bluff crater is one of the most important sites on the Aranda people's spiritual map. Many Aranda come here to commune with their ancestors. Although the land is barren, it's always been the friend of the Aranda. It provides their food, and even in the toughest times, it's never let them down. When it rains, nature produces a special treat. Buried treasure. But these are not pearls, they're ants. Honeypot ants. Although it's hard work, it's always been the duty of women to collect the honeypot ants. First, the honey soldier ants have to be identified among the different species. The sun must be high in the sky, casting few shadows. The rest is done with a practiced eye and patience. It's important to find the exact hole where the soldiers disappear into the earth.
To look for ants with yellow stripe at the back. They come up every after the rain. They walk around, get all the honey from the trees. The mother trees. With them red flowers, they get some honey from there, the workers, and they go down. to feed them other ones.
Then the hard part, following the path of the soldiers deep underground. Their tunnels are usually vertical, running 2.5 metres straight down. If you dig carefully at first, you can trace their direction. No honey ant starves, even during the harshest drought, because this particular species creates living food depots. A particular caste of honey ant is force-fed by soldiers when food is abundant. Their expandable abdomens swell with the sweet nectar until they can't move. When times are hard, they simply regurgitate the stored nectar to feed the rest of the colony. You can think of honeypots as vitamin C candy because the ants' abdomens contain many health-giving substances besides sugar. To this day, Aranda women feed them to their children as a cold remedy. But at Hermannsburg, all the kids have to do to get their vitamin C is to go and pick a lemon. This old citrus tree was already bearing fruit when Peter was a boy.
This is the house that I grew up in, and the house looks much the same, but the garden was very different in those days. We had a lawn here where we used to sleep on the hot nights when the house got too hot.
The 200-kilometre long West MacDonnell Ranges are only a remnant of a huge mountain range that once towered above the Red Centre, as high as the Himalayas. Wind, water, ice and heat have eroded the sandstone for hundreds of millions of years, creating the different habitats we see today. To the east, the end of the range disintegrates into sand, forming the dunes of the Simpson Desert. The arid outback never felt the tread of horses until they arrived with the cattle farmers and their stockmen. Now there are more wild horses or brumbies here than on any other continent. Australia was also a major breeding centre for war horses during the British Empire. When machines took over, the horses were set free to join the wild herds of brumbies that roam the West MacDonnell region to this day. Horses need to drink every 24 hours. They socialise around the waterholes. In good seasons, their population increases dramatically. But as an introduced animal, the horse is not as well adapted to drought as endemic species like the emu. In severe drought, emus form large groups and follow the rain clouds for hundreds of miles until they find pasture again. These migrations have left many a farmer in despair when he finds hundreds of these huge, hungry birds trampling his crops. The emu is one of two heraldic animals of Australia, the other being the red kangaroo. Both are relatively common, so much so that in good seasons, these red giants sometimes breed to plague proportions. If they are attacked or during dominance battles, males rock back on their hind legs, using their tails for balance, and lash at each other with sharp claws, like a boxing match. When equally matched opponents face off, the struggle can end up a bloody one. But there are seldom fatalities. More likely it's the terrible droughts that ravage the wildlife of Central Australia. And there are always scavengers, like the wedgetail and the dingoes, to deal with the carcasses. In times of drought, the brumbies are the least adaptable. It's been 8 months without any rain. As the water dries up, the pressure on the waterholes is enormous. Not only horses, but cattle, camels, donkeys, goats and rabbits have to share the resources with the native animals. Food around the waterholes soon runs out, and the horses have to travel further each day to eat. This makes them weaker still, and soon they are caught in a deadly cycle of starvation and thirst. With 200 horses drinking at this waterhole every day, it soon dries out. They take to digging in the dry riverbeds. Stallions fight with each other for a mouthful of wet sand. A desperate mare pushes her foal aside. The mother must stay alive to breed again. It's the law of nature. The predators await their opportunity. Perhaps the cruelest irony of all is that within a few hours of the foal's death, it starts raining. Bringing 50 millimetres in a flash flood. The casualties of a lost struggle are washed away. And within a few days, the green shoots will come through, and the survivors will eat again. Peter lives where he feels most at home, in nature, at the foot of the West MacDonnell Ranges. It is 50 kilometres to Alice Springs, so he grows as much of his own food as possible. His plot is mostly natural, and he makes sure that no introduced plants grow on it. It's shaded by giant eucalyptus, a very special tree for the original Australians.
This is called a ghost gum for obvious reasons. In the dream time, there was these Aboriginal ladies, young ladies who passed through here, and they were very proud of their bodies, and they used to dance, showing off their beautiful bodies. And this is one of them that is still here, dancing, showing me her beautiful bodies. was over there as old husband, grumpy old man saying, "Stop being such a show-off."
Peter built this little house himself. It has electricity and running water, unusual out here.
This is the remains of a billion-year-old stromatoliths. They were the first organisms to create reefs on the planet and created the oxygen that we breathe. This is part of a jawbone from Alcuda of a wombat-like animal bigger than a sheep that was very common here 8 million years ago.
Peter lives alone. His 3 children visit him when they can, with his grandchildren. He devotes himself to his passion, the natural history of the West MacDonnells. Some of his fossils give an indication of what the vegetation was like in the early days of life on this part of the earth.
So about 8 million years ago, the biggest bird that ever walked on the planet was walking around in this part of the world, and I'm helping the expert dig out the bones east of Alice Springs. And here's just a little toe bone of the bird, and here's part of its huge leg bone. And it's not related to the emu, it's related to the geese, actually.
Australia has not always looked like this. The valleys of the West MacDonnells were once lush and green. Mighty trees grew here, whose leaves were eaten by that prehistoric species of giant goose.
The interesting thing about this whole area is that there is something like 15 to 20 types of shrubs and trees. There's such a diversity of plants that you have to say it's a jungle, a mixture of all sorts of different plants. And that's high biodiversity. That makes this place very special indeed.
Although the red sandstone has hardly any ready nutrients, the vegetation has thrived on recent heavy rain. But it is already tinder dry again and ready to burst into flames. Once everything is burned to charcoal, the dry roots of the shrub no longer give the rocks support, and erosion will take its course.
So here we're looking at the type of vegetation that I consider was the primary Gondwana land vegetation that was common all over this desert 100,000 years ago. And you only find little patches of it left here in these fire shadow areas where the fire can't get into. But all you have to do is just look around the corner up on the hill here and you see the spinifex with the mallees. Now mallees love fire, so that would have had dry jungle all over it before you got all the fire coming in and destroying what's behind us.
Spinifex is so flammable that it even burns soaking wet. This shaggy grass, which is almost indigestible for animals, colonises any area that fire has ravaged. It's so prolific that it eliminates all its competition.
Of course, Spinifex doesn't sit down and say, I'm going to take over the mulga. It is just a process that's happening where one plant has a better advantage after fire than the other one. But I like to think of the Spinifex sitting there saying, "Ah, mulga, you're doomed. We're taking over. You've had it, mate."
In winter, the nighttime temperature in the desert drops below zero. In this season, it's safe to light a small campfire. Peter is now over 70 years old. He worked on cattle stations before he began to study biology. He has spent most of his life in the outdoors. 4 plants are named after him as international recognition for his botanical work. The insects move more slowly after sunset. The narrow-footed marsupial mouse, the dunnart, is on the hunt. Almost all small mammals in Central Australia are nocturnal. Otherwise, the heat of the day would dehydrate their fragile bodies. Once it has devoured a rich treat like this grasshopper, it stores fat reserves in its tail against times of drought. This resourceful marsupial mouse cannot do anything to prevent the destruction of its habitat by fire. The bush ignites quickly in the outback, mostly from so-called dry storms, when lightning strikes but no rain falls. But man-made fires have also changed the landscape. Wherever the Aboriginal tribes roamed during their seasonal migrations, they used their fire sticks to create paths and clearings. Many animals are killed by bushfires if they're too slow to escape. Fire in the flat grassland spreads quickly and can soon get out of control. But here at least it's accessible by fire crews. Mountain fires, however, are much more difficult to extinguish. They can unleash an inferno that will burn out of control. Few animals possess the survival strategy of the echidna. Probably why it's one of the oldest species of mammals on Earth. Fire has changed this landscape permanently. For some species, it brings new life, but for others, permanent disaster. The winner in the end is the indestructible spinifex grass.
So what we can see here is there's been 2 fires here, and the taller trees survived the first fire, but what was here before is now burnt away, and we had young mulga coming up, and they've been burnt in the second fire, so we don't expect to see any mulga back here again. Whereas you look over there, you can see where there's still some mulga left. So this is now just ready for spinifex to come in, and goodbye mulga forever.
Even in the desert, there are secret stores of water. Apparently parched rivers can still retain moisture in deep layers of sediment, even after years of brutal drought. Ranges are punctuated by canyons and gorges caused by millions of years of water erosion. The Finke River, the most well-known in this region, is one of the oldest river systems on Earth. 400 million years ago, it carved out the Glen Helen Gorge in the West MacDonnells. Along with 5 other gorges in the ranges, the waterhole remains full even in extreme dry periods and forms a precious habitat. For most of the day, it's shaded and cool. The gorges of the West MacDonnell Ranges provide an important ecological niche. The freshwater fish in these shallow waters used to live in the ocean. Until millions of years ago, they were enclosed by the land. In the dry season, the fish struggle against the declining oxygen content in the water. Predators then find them easy pickings. Much about this unique place still awaits discovery. The picturesque Ormiston Gorge, with its rugged cliffs and sheltered valley billabongs, is one of Peter Latz's favourite hunting grounds. It is so botanically rich because it is largely protected from bushfires.
Now this tree is very fire sensitive. You won't find any in the spinifex up the hill there, but it was an important plant to the Aborigines, and they told me when I first asked them about it, we used it to smoke our babies. And I thought, smoked babies, they must be delicious. No, I got it wrong. What they do is they dig a hole, baby size, light a fire in it, till the coals burn down, and then they put this plant on top of the coals, and the fumes that come up are very good for the baby. Even an adult can be treated this way, and they say after you lie there for half an hour, you can get up and hunt a kangaroo.
The series of billabongs in the deep gorges of the West MacDonnells inspires images of a desert Eden. Today, only remnants of this earthly paradise are preserved, and you have to look long and hard to find them. Millennia of fire and heat have transformed this into a dramatically austere landscape. But for connoisseurs of the past, a protected valley at the southern edge of the West MacDonnell National Park takes us to a time when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. A fringe of St Mary's palms points the way to one of the most beautiful places in Central Australia. In the heat of summer, the life-giving water for these ancient evergreen trees comes from natural reservoirs in the porous, weathered rock. What Peter is particularly interested in here are some shrubs with feather-like branches, not unlike palm fronds.
So most people think this is a palm. In fact, it's closer to the ferns. It's really dinosaur food. This is a plant, or very close to it, that was around when dinosaurs ruled the earth. It's very ancient. And in fact, if you look at the big palms behind that grow very tall, you'd think they'd be much older. This individual here is probably 4 times as old as those big tall palms in the background.
Palm Valley is the only place in Central Australia where St Mary's palms survive. They are a remnant of the red centre's ancient tropical past. While botanists once struggled to understand what the species was doing here, the Aborigines have their own explanation from the Dreamtime. In their creation history of this country, every rock and every tree has its place and its own special purpose.
The Aboriginal story is very interesting too, because there's a hill 100 kilometres north of here, and the story, the Dreamtime story, is that the old men were initiating the young men, and they had their hair tied into a bun behind their head, and which was traditional. And there was this huge bushfire. It was so terrific that it killed all the old men and blew the young men up into the sky, and some of them landed near Goss's Bluff and turned into the grass trees, and the rest of them landed here in Palm Valley. And so these trees you see here are actually in the mythology the spirit of the young initiates who were burnt in this horrific fire.
Peter searches for rare plants that once dominated the continent. Due to Peter's discoveries, we are now more aware of the prehistory of the outback. And this gem in the heart of the West Macdonnell National Park is a living remnant of how the red heart of Australia once looked, before fire changed the country forever.